The environment has been
What we're saying is have a heart.
We've got to be able to regenerate our
There'll be people who are kind, people who are cruel, but that's life. You can be bigoted about bigots. I'm fine with that.
What's wrong with Singaporeans?
Okay, let me now talk about sex, right? But as a society, are we becoming more promiscuous?
That's what we do.
We're not suggesting that you are. What is the trend in Singapore?
I don't have figures for you, but from my general sense is yes. My general sense is that
from our outreach, we do have a sense that sexual debut is getting younger and younger. Used to be late teens. Now we're getting people 12 or 14 who have already had their first sexual encounter. So then when we try and reach out to schools or try and give talks at schools, we never succeed.
Because the schools don't think that they have students that are promiscuous.
Well, it's also
we can't talk about HIV or
you can't talk about homosexuality either
yeah.
in the schools, and which is a real problem because if you take a look at the statistics of route of transmission by age, it turns out that in the 15 to 19-year-olds, something like 80% of those infected got it through homosexual encounters. And yet we refuse to allow for the discussion of homosexual relationships in the schools and basically refuse to talk about safer sex with this group of people.
So if they're having sex since the age of 12, age of 14, and we can't
How
talk
do
to
they,
them about...
these are with adults?
No, it may be among each other.
Adults.
And they've been doing it for 10 years and we reached them at the age of 20, 21. They tell us, I've been having sex so long. What are you telling me now? I've been doing something right.
And also oral sex. Young girls been having oral sex, from the time they're 13. And nothing is being done because...
So what can be done?
Because you have a very conservative society.
So if you could educate them, what would you educate them on?
Well, we have, the point is this, that if you give people the information, they can make informed decisions. It's not for you. What I try and tell parents is, you are not going to be there when your child has their first sexual encounter. You're not. You're going to be at the movies and they are going to have their first sexual encounter. They'll be persuaded by some young boy or whatever it is. And so it's much better to give them the information. I mean, what's the point of not telling them?
Okay, on the one hand, you have this sensible argument that knowledge helps to protect them.
Right.
And I think the Health Promotion Board took this stance on gay relationships, but they got whacked by the religious bodies. So now we have two contending sides, one with people with religious beliefs which are very valid and they believe strongly in them, and then you have the need for the Health Promotion Board to educate people so that they're not exposed to the dangers of unprotected sex.
Correct.
Right.
What is the solution? You're all educators now.
You can't base policy or information given out by government agencies on religious doctrine.
No, we're talking of reality now.
The reality basically is better reflected by the HPV facts than it is by what the religious groups will tell you.
But it still has to be accepted by the community. So how do you persuade this group of people that yes, education is important and it is not undermining the moral fiber of religious principles? You have to give them a comfort level. You cannot just tell them education is important and expect them to accept it. They cannot.
I think that then the person delivering the education has got to be sensitive to whatever cultures.
You have to be sensitive to the culture and to the religious feelings, but at the same time, you don't change the message. I mean, you still give the correct facts.
You have to give the facts because if you don't, more kids are going to become infected with STIs and HIV.
They didn't even, perhaps what was missing was that they never prefaced the advice by giving a moral judgment on homosexuality. Why
should you give a moral judgment?
in order to win over the people who live by religious principles.
But that doesn't help the people who really need the information.
I know.
You don't deal properly with youth, you know, who are dealing with sexual orientation issues by judging them. That's the best way to push them away.
But we have an impasse here, you know, because the message is important, the message has to be transmitted. It has to be transmitted to young people. Part of society, and an important part of society, two big religious groups object to the stance taken that there seems to be no judgment on this. So that what I'm trying to say, is there a way where you can get this important message through, but at the same time not raise the hackles of...
There may not be.
Well, that's depressing if you say that.
Well, I mean, what you've got, you know, are entrenched religious bigotry, really, in many respects, but entrenched religious beliefs, you know, that basically stigmatize people with, you know, who are different in terms of their sexuality, and basically tries to demonize them. I know of churches in Singapore that teach that gay people are possessed of demons. I mean, when you're dealing, when you deal with this kind of thing...
For Buddhists, we just love every living thing, rather than God.
Yeah.
You can love animal, why can't you love a different... As long as they're living thing.
Okay, we are diverging. I was just trying to see whether there could be some kind of headway in this impasse.
You know, the terrifying thing is that while this impasse is being, you know, not addressed, the same issues that happened with Aware are continuing, and this continuation will stop youngsters from getting the education they need in order to stop them from getting gonorrhea and syphilis and HIV.
Cannot the education go the other way? Number one, do not engage in premarital sex if you can. If you want to have sex with your spouse. That's number one. The second focus that if you do want to have sex, be aware that you can pick up sexually transmitted diseases. HIV is one, but there are many others. I can name you 50 to 100 others.
There's so many, but we're talking about 13-year-olds.
There is a glimpse of an acceptability there. That's what I'm trying to get at. He prefaced the advice by giving some kind of judgment. Premarital sex is not encouraged, but if you must have premarital sex, then this is what. Maybe that's more palatable.
Yeah, but this is not acceptable. What we're saying is that you can't even talk about condoms to school kids.
No, wait. Now I'm just talking about this issue where the religious bodies object to the fact that you have made homosexuality as if it were the norm. But if you preface it by saying, by giving certain principles or practices like saying premarital sex should be avoided, I don't think people in society would object or would say that premarital sex is natural. You advise against having it, but if you must have it, you're frowning.
Well, I think that it's a little bit off target, you know, to say something like premarital sex is not natural. I mean, sex happens to be a natural human function.
Yeah, it can go either way, right? It can be natural and acceptable, or it can be not natural and not acceptable, depending on your beliefs. And people should be free to exercise their beliefs, because in a way, by saying that you can treat it as natural,
so the religious groups can put up their own approaches to sexuality. But keep the approach to sexuality on the part of government agencies secular, on the basis of the best professional opinion.
But even from the viewpoint, medical viewpoint, having premarital sex or having casual sex is not advised, right?
Okay. The problem with having premarital sex is many people will end up having multiple sexual partners. And that's a problem, because sexually transmitted diseases will occur and can occur. In fact, the risk of cervical cancer before the availability of the vaccine is actually proportional to the number of sexual partners you have. If the person only had one sexual partner and the other partner and the spouse only had one other sexual partner, then the risk is practically zero.
See, this is why I say HIV is a very complex issue. You can't talk about HIV, you can't talk about sex. And your example is only applicable mostly in heterosexual relationship. If we're talking about homosexual relationship, where do they get their source of information? Are there any credible sources of anything they can mirror themselves? And if they can't, and if their first exposure to homosexual is pornography, then it's an assumed norm that sex is part of a homosexual relationship. That's why sex is it's such an important part. And then if you don't correct misconceptions about what it is, then the problem will be perpetuated. If you can't have proper
information
on television, on movies, and everything is censored, even an R21 film, then that doesn't make sense. Why are consenting adults not able to make that? Are we treated as children, even when it's an R21 film? Not PG, not free to air.
So what is your recommendations and your proposal?
That it's silly to have such backward Singapore is such a cosmopolitan city. We shouldn't even be discussing this at this point in time, at 2014. We should be leapfrogging the whole society to what we're saying we are. We are a world-class city. If we are, then why are we still discussing things like that?
Like? We can be specific.
we do, and we will continue to. I think this is an unresolved question. I'm going to move to an easier area.